Good morning. I'm Steve Scalazzo-Pardi, head of FinTech at Ketkuti Kauki Advocates, a local law firm. I'm going to talk about smart contracts, and there's an important preface that I'm neither a lawyer nor a developer. In fact, when I was at school, we had these career days when they tell us, what we could be when we grow up. And somehow none of the options appeal to me. So an architect like my dad, yeah. Lawyer like my uncle, not really. Doctor, no. And that went on until I was around 14, and we had this new subject at school called business studies. And from the first minute when this new teacher started talking about equity, bonds, leverage, I was hooked, and I was like, all right, there's my career. Since then I went on to study at university here in Malta, and after that I've worked in insurance, wealth management, and in the corporate world, where currently I guide clients through Malta's sphere on fintech, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies. The point of all that was just to give the backdrop that my perspective on smart contracts is, yes, obviously partly legal. I'm with a law firm, so I can't escape that. But more so from the commercialization or adoption by businesses of blockchain in the line of their business. So I'm not going to waste your time with explaining what smart contracts are. Presumably, if you're here, we're all on the same page. I will set the scene by just running through some of the pros and cons of smart contracts, again from the point of view of a company using it in driving its business forward. So with a smart contract, you get, when it's done right and the initial work has been done on getting it right, you get accuracy. So the terms are there, they're clearly laid out, and everyone knows what they're getting in for. Further, when the smart contract gets to execution, again, because it's been laid out and suitable for a computer code, it's a series of steps. So there should be no doubt as to the execution of that smart contract. So there should be no surprises to either party of the contract when it is executed. Clearly, the above should help more clear communication in the contractual relationships. There's also an additional speed of processing because unlike having human parties who need to review what has happened, compare that to the contract terms, see whether the contract has been fulfilled or otherwise, and the next steps. The blockchain never sleeps, so as soon as the trigger events occur, the smart contract starts to take place, and as every event is concluded, it works its way through till the conclusion of the contract. In many scenarios, the middlemen or transaction processors can be excluded, if not completely, then largely, which again should obviously lead to further gains in efficiency and a reduction in cost. One of the sort of advertised advantages of DLT technology is security. I'll talk about that in a minute. Another key advantage to blockchain or other forms of DLT technologies is the ability to leverage other technological opportunities. So all the speakers before me have touched on the Internet of Things. So if you've got connected devices and machines that can talk to each other or feed into the blockchain, they can all let the blockchain know what's happening at every step, and those can be the trigger events for the smart contract to start working its way through. If we look at the other end, the nature of blockchain is that it collects a high level of granular detail of transactions that can all be fed into vast processing machines for data learning, AI, and so on. So these are all obviously very interesting for businesses to be looking at. Some companies have made giant strides in adopting blockchain technology. Others are evaluating and trying to see what the business use case is for their firm. So clearly businesses should be looking at DLT adoption. The question is, what should they consider before jumping onto the blockchain train? So at the simplest level, and I think one of the speakers before me did touch on this, blockchain is essentially technology. So from a company point of view, it's an investment in its IT. So as with other ITs, it can, if developed well, be a disruptor for the company, and the company can obviously put that through to the marketplace. So if you're looking at logistics, maybe they can be quicker than others, they can be faster than others, cheaper than others. There could be something where they can really lead the market. But it's still going to be an IT implementation. So it's going to be costly, it's going to take up time, money, and human resources. So obviously businesses do need to look carefully at what their business case is and why they're going for it. So there are currently some obstacles to the adoption of blockchain on a more widespread scale. One is that there are different forms of DLT technology coming to the fore, not only blockchain. So some companies are adopting a wait-and-see approach to see which of them possibly offers more than others. So, or if any of them jump to the fore and become the mainstream adopted one, and obviously companies would want to be on that one and not a smaller one that's less used. So they all offer different benefits. So they could be higher security, higher efficiency, cheaper processing costs. So some companies are just waiting to see what rolls out on that front. I mentioned security earlier. Smart contract security has to be seen as distinct from the security of the blockchain itself. There have been countless instances of smart contracts failing or being hacked. Failing in the sense that they were not properly developed to execute the sequence of events from start to end. So either there were events that weren't programmed for, and so the smart contract sticks, or transactional problems. It keeps on paying out, for example, or it refuses to pay out when it should. So there was obviously the famous 2016 DAO smart contract which failed, where something like 4 million Ether were hacked, essentially. And it was not the Ether platform, but the EAO smart contract that was actually the weakness. Even today, Ether boasts a failure rate of 3% on a smart contract. Or I should say it boasts a success rate of 97%. Which is obviously phenomenally good for technology that is so new. But from the point of view of a board of directors or a CEO, it can be hard to jump onto a platform that still has a 3% failure rate. What if that happens on a multi-million or multi-billion contract? Who's going to explain that to the shareholders? Clearly, there are many groups that offer solutions to some of these issues. So there are companies that actually audit smart contracts from an integrity point of view. So it tries to run the smart contract countless times just to make sure that it does execute properly in different scenarios. So thanks for sticking with me so far. That was just a bit of where companies are vis-a-vis smart contracts. The aim of my talk here is more on the role that regulation has to play in this environment. So there's a lot of talk in blockchain circles that the entire point of developing a blockchain was precisely to have a distributed peer-to-peer network that circumvents a central regulatory authority. The challenge there is that much of regulation today in different spheres has been built up around the middleman. So if you look at for example, financial services intermediaries, they are all regulated, and that is how the regulator can ensure a regulated playing field, providing confidence to investors and consumers, and ensuring that companies abide by the same set of rules or a level playing field. So how, if blockchain does away with the middlemen, who are currently the regulated parties, then what next? How can we ensure protection to investors, to consumers, and also to operators? If I'm going to put money into a business, I want to know that my competitor has the same challenges and obstacles that I do, and the same advantages. So let's just take a minute to consider the different actors in a smart contract. So first of all, you've got the developers who actually built the DLT and continue to maintain it, ensure that it's upgraded, it's secure, etc. You've got the users who transact on it, so let's say the ones who would go in and use a smart contract on the platform. And you've got the miners who validate those transactions that make up the smart contract. Well, where do you start with regulation? Who do you regulate? Should you regulate anyone? As I said, I'm not a lawyer, but the lawyers I do work with, and there's one over there, they assure me that a contract is a legal agreement, whether that is verbal, written, signed and notarized and apostilled, or if it is digitally recorded. So let's take, so if the nature of that contract is regulated, then the smart contract cannot escape regulation. So let's take as an example an insurance contract written on a smart contract. Well, insurance in most countries is regulated. Certainly in Europe and here in Malta, it is highly regulated. So if I want to in any way issue an insurance contract to someone else, even on a smart contract, that has to be regulated and meet the insurance law criteria. So the question arises, should we invent new laws for smart contracts? For digital assets, as again the speakers before me were saying, we're going to have software that's an asset, intellectual property, houses, mobiles, cars, everything talking to each other. Is it even wise to regulate such an area, especially when the industry is so new? Smart contracts are essentially a few years old. And on the other hand, we've got a wealth of tried and tested regulation and laws that apply to most areas of business, again, not least financial services. So Malta has taken the approach of a dual strategy that takes or attempts to take the best of both worlds. So existing laws that have been improved over time have the benefit of years of being enforced and being tried through courts, will still apply based on the nature of the activity. So back to my example, an insurance contract will still be licensed by insurance law. However, there is a new regulatory regime that will apply to distributed ledger technology and smart contracts. What this means realistically is that lawyers who assist with putting together contracts and smart contracts and business executives who are looking to make use of this technology will need to become a lot closer to software developers. They are possibly going to need to learn or understand coding themselves. the way a smart contract works is it works in a sequential, step-by-step approach. If this, then that. And it works its way through all the way down to the end. So let's take as a simple example. Suppose you do something very small for a fund, and as a result of that, you're due to get 0.001% of every transaction on that fund. In actual fact, you're so busy with your real job that you're never going to follow up on what transactions the fund had and whether you got your 0.001% on the transactions. If those are built into a smart contract, your fee, let's call it, is a part of the smart contract. It's a part of the transaction. And the transaction will not be completed until your tiny 0.001% and every other tiny part has been properly recorded, accounted, paid out, and executed. And only then will the transaction be completed. So smart contracts are a combination of natural language, so let's say English, as well as the programming language, the actual code that's used to put it together. And in fact, the ITAS Act, which comes into force a week from today, actually, it holds that the English language will prevail over the actual code. So there does really need to be extreme attention paid to how the smart contracts are coded and so how they will play out to ensure that they're executed in line with the expectations of the parties contracting to the agreement. What we're seeing with several clients that we advise is that and again I've seen this, I'd say over my career, the IT function has gone from a supporting function in the company. So you used to have physical archives, and now they're online. We used to send letters to each other, now it's on email. So it just became an enabler or a helper. Whereas now IT has become really a driver of the business and can really change the way companies are working, and can give them that edge over competitors who possibly don't see the same opportunities inherent in the technology. Having said that, businesses need to understand what blockchain can offer. So it's not just a matter of saying, okay, this blockchain, it's really good, people are making millions, let me jump aboard. They really need to sit back and understand what blockchain can do for their business, for their area, for their market, and what areas it can assist them with. There does need to be a very clear business use case for them to implement. Going beyond the implementation of smart contracts, again, because smart contracts are still in their infancy, there are new challenges to overcome. So computers do not understand nuance or fine distinction in the way that humans do. So computers don't do 50 shades of grey. There's black, there's white, and anything in between needs to be clearly defined. This is not just a problem for lawyers or executives to worry about, but courts will also need to wake up to this. So how will disputes be settled when an unforeseen event takes place that possibly nullifies the terms of a smart contract, but that smart contract has already self-executed because all the trigger events took place? So this is an ongoing debate that that does need to be solved, or there does need to be some light at the end of the tunnel before I believe you can see a mass, widespread adoption of blockchain in different areas. So in my personal opinion, what the global economy needs in order to really see distributed ledger technology and the associated technologies that we're talking about really move forward is to cut away the uncertainty that surrounds it, and bring certainty of treatment and business use to the fore. So we need to see worldwide standards of best practice being set to provide clarity and transparency. Regulators around the world are moving at different speeds on blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Some have very, very differing points of view, as I'm sure you're aware. So until the regulators catch up, I do believe it's incumbent upon the industry to put forward those standards of best practice, and more importantly, agree on the standards that maximize transparency, honesty, fairness, and do not benefit or advantage one party over another in any unfair manner. Malta's regulators, the MFSA and the MDIA, have already set the global benchmark for a legislative framework in this area. And I believe that with your belief, time, and investment, we really can move forward and make Malta a blockchain center of excellence. Thank you.